Today we will talk about Chapter 3 Guidelines, Principles, and Theories of the Designing the User Interface and Strategies for Effective Human Computer Interaction. So, in this chapter, we'll talk about guidelines, principles, and theories. So, let's define what that means for our purpose. Guidelines are low level, they are focused on advice. So, the guidelines are low level, focused advice about good practices and cautions against dangers. The principles are mid level strategies or rules that are used to analyze and compare the design alternatives. And the theories are the high level and widely acceptable frameworks. And they draw on during the design and evaluation, and as well as to support the customer communications and needs. We can also try to predict the theories. For example, we can try to predict the weather forecast, the climate, or the stock market, or we can predict regarding individuals' posting rates for community discussions. So let's start with the first thing here in our list, the guidelines. So the guideline document helps by developing a shared language and promoting consistency among multiple designers. Oh. In terminology usage, user interface appearance and the action sequences. It is based on the best practices. They could be critics on the guidelines as well as proponents. From the critics' point of view, they could be criticizing the document for anything really. They could say it's too specific, it's incomplete, hard to apply, or something like that. The proponents would contribute to encapsulating the experience and contributing to the environment. So let's look at guidelines. The early Apple and Microsoft guidelines, which were influential for the desktop interface designers. These particular guidelines were widely spread and taken into consideration and followed by other companies, especially for companies that run web applications and mobile device applications. So we need to see how we can adapt our guidelines to fit those customers. So what can the interface have? There is an example here. If you go to that link, you would be able to see similar furniture like ours here. So the sample of the National Cancer Institute guidelines is to use standardized task sequences to ensure that the embedded links are descriptive and working. Use the house or use the guidelines for providing headings, unique and descriptive headings. Use checkbox buttons for binary choices. So when you have an IP address, you would like to divide it in two. We can rely on one of those bullets that this belief is placed into that particular subject, and so we would ensure that embedded links are descriptive, that we use unique and descriptive headings, check boxes for binary choices. We would use radio buttons for mutually exclusive choices, and we would like to develop a website showing what we will be doing each week by providing links to PowerPoints, answers to PowerPoints, and various questions that arise. But we could have pages that can print properly and use the thumbnail images to preview larger images. So these are some guidelines for the user interface design. Let's look at the accessibility guidelines. So if we would like to make our product available to non-standard customers, it means customers that had some childhood trauma or injury that are still healing right now. So sample guidelines provide a text equivalent for every non-text element. So let's say if there is a picture or something that the person can feel with their fingers or thumbnails and say, okay, this is my wife or this is my husband, and so on. For any time-based multimedia presentations, we would like to synchronize the equivalent alternatives. we can use colors, pictures, and sounds. So colors should be shown on each side and convey that. And then, okay, so then the title of each frame would facilitate identification and navigation. Let's look on organizing the display. So organizing the display according to Smith and Moser, a research article, they offer 5 high-level goals. We would like to have consistency of data display. For example, the terminology, the formats, the colors, the limiters, and using caps or capitals. We would like to have efficient information assimilations by the user. So minimum input actions are required for the user, such as justification spacing, decimal points, appropriate units, comprehensible tables, and so on. Also, we would like to have a minimum memory load on the user. Compatibility of the data display with data entry. So compatibility of the data display with data entry, as well as flexibility for user control of what of their data or personal data is being displayed. So we've talked about guidelines. Let's now talk about principles. That was the second point in our table. Principles are more fundamental. They are really wide applicable. So principles are more fundamental and widely applicable and more enduring than the guidelines. So they are used when we require more clarification. Let's look at some fundamental principles. The first one is to determine the skill level of the user, because they are prerequisite courses for certain courses, especially in computer science and computer programming. programming languages take up a lot of space in the front, and they would be hauled away. It's the best thing to do with them, but we would be following a similar method to what we followed last time. We would identify what is the issue that we're working on and create a solution for it. We would identify the tasks and choose between styles if necessary. Apply the 8 golden rules of interface design and prevent errors. To determine the user's skill levels, we would like to know the user. There are several descriptors of the user within our database. They would include the age, gender, physical and cognitive abilities of the user. We could look at their education as well as their background of where they descend or where they're coming from, or what kind of training they've completed, what is their motivation, and then we can look at on personal level as well, such as creative pursuits, writing a book, or starting their own business. And alright, so design goals for skill level. There is novice or first-time users. There is medium, which is knowledgeable, intermediate users, and the high level is the expert who is frequently using our system. There are multi-layer designs, personalized menus, and control of information feedback. Alright, so the multi-layer designs would include personalized menus and control of the informative feedback. And the next thing we would like to do is to identify the tasks. The task analysis would usually involve, it's time consuming, so it is good if we have some automated process for identifying the tasks. Then we would do a decomposition of the high level tasks. Okay, so relative tasks, frequencies, basis for design decisions. We have an example here, frequency of task by a job title. So the titles are listed on the left side, they are in the column, such as nurse, physician, supervisor, medical record manufacturers, or database programmer. And then we have their tasks. For example, query by patient, update data, add relations, and evaluate the system. And over here we can see that the task which is relevant to that particular job title is marked with a star or an asterisk. So nurse, physician, supervisor, alright, so we can see the physician is marked on query by patient and update data, while the supervisor is marked on those two as well as query across patients. Appointment personnel, I received a document explaining which days you will be using for this particular holiday that we have right now on February 14. Sorry, in January. So the medical record maintainer has more tasks checked than the supervisor. They have also the query across patients as well as add relations. Clinical researcher would have query across patients as well as to evaluate the system. And finally, the database programmer Alright, we can choose interaction style. We can choose between direct manipulation, menu selection, form fill-in, or command language. Natural language processing can be used as well to detect what we're saying. For example, my age is such and such, or move this radio button from here to there, or tell me what the weather forecast is. So it is able to understand our speech and take specific actions based on that. Let's look at this table that shows advantages and disadvantages for each of those categories. The direct manipulation, alright, so the advantages are visually presents task concepts and allows easy learning, easy retention, allows errors to be avoided and encourages exploration, affords high subjective satisfaction of the users. What would be the disadvantages of this direct manipulation? May be hard to program, may require graphic displays and pointing devices. Menu selection. The advantages are that it shortens learning and reduces keystrokes, permits use of dialogue management tools, and allows support and error handling. The disadvantages would include that it presents danger in either too many menus, and it may slow the frequent users. Requires rapid display rate and consumes screen space. How about the form filling? It will simplify the data entry, requires modest training. The common language, the advantages are that it's flexible and appeals to power users, also supports user initiatives, and allows convenient creation of uh, whatever the user has defined as small codes or macros. The disadvantages are poor error handling and require substantial training. Alright, so that is for the natural language will relieve burden of learning syntax, but it requires clarification dialogue and may require more keystrokes. And let's look at the 8 important rules of interface design. For abbreviation, the interface design will abbreviate it with a capital D so that we can remember. The first one is to strive for consistency. Second is to cater universal usability. Also to offer informative feedback, to design dialogues, Alright, offer informative feedback, design dialogues that yield closure, prevent errors, permit easy reversal of actions. So if we have done something we don't like, we can use the undo button. So permits easy removal of actions, keeps users in control, reduce the short-term memory load. So these are important rules for designing the user interface. So that is on automation and human control. There can also be supervisory control that deals with the real-world open systems. Like air traffic controllers, for example. They might have small interface design effort, but they are high consequences if the design is causing any issues, because it's an airplane after all, and it detects the airplanes flying. The design should place the user in control and automate only it is used to improve system performance without without reducing the human involvement. Okay, so this is all that we have for the guidelines, principles, and theories.